Live today, we are introducing a new program to the Being an Engineer podcast to recognize engineers who excel in their field. Go to teampipeline.us/excellence and fill out the form with the name of your nominee and a short description of what makes him or her deserving of the award. Winners will be announced and recognized on the show and will receive some complimentary Being an Engineer podcast swag. The program is live right now. Go to teampipeline.us/excellence and give an engineer the recognition he or she deserves.
I did everything. I was the only designer that they had. I did all of the design, all of the engineering, all the supply chain, everything. And it made way more sense. And I feel like that's an opportunity most people don't have unless you work at a really small company.
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we're speaking with Ian Peterman. Ian grew up surrounded by design, engineering, and entrepreneurial people. He started his first business at the age of 12, and after working as a designer for over a decade within startups and companies like HP, he started the Peterman Design Firm to help visionaries develop products and businesses. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So what made you decide to begin a career in product design?
Well, I was one of those kids that knew at a young age. So I always was drawing, sketching. I wanted to invent things. I thought, James Bond devices were the coolest things ever. And my dad happened to be a designer and he did a lot of contract work at home. So I got to see him actually doing design work and decided I wanted to try it. So I started to learn CAD a little bit and then worked for my dad when I was a kid as a subcontractor, getting to practice and learn. And then from there, I got an internship when I was 16, working, doing telecommunications lasers, loved it and never left.
Cool. I love that you worked for your dad doing some kind of engineering or CAD related work growing up. What did you do for him?
I did a lot of CAD drafting. So I learned AutoCAD and I did wiring schematics, did like rack mounted units for medical and clean rooms and things like that. And kind of really on the super nitty gritty technical drawing side.
And how old were you then?
I started when I was 12. I learned I knew SolidWorks pretty well by the time I was 13.
Really? That's so cool. Yeah. I bet that was super helpful for your dad, right? To just hand some of the drafting work over to you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely helped him. Definitely had to take some time to teach me too, but I got better.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like all of us. All right. Well, you talk about growing up surrounded by design, engineering, accounting, and entrepreneurial people. We heard a little bit about your dad already, certainly on the design and engineering side. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that environment that you grew up in. What else can you share? Yeah.
So my grandfather, my dad's dad was also a designer, engineer. He worked at Boeing on 747. And my mom was an accountant, still is. She's a CPA. And my parents both, they like to start just little businesses, nothing, I didn't inherit a huge trust fund from any of it, but I got to watch them start different businesses. And one actually is called Insight Technical Education. And they created some drawing material for teaching kids how to draw. So he actually used what he used. That's how he taught me. And then created a book out of it. And so that one's still alive. I'm actually running it. It's just a little self-published company, but that was a lot of learning how that went and having, not every business made it. That's actually the only one still around. So learning how things fail as well was definitely part of the home curriculum of seeing them start and not always win.
I'm curious, was that traumatic for you at all as a kid, or that was just part of the environment and it was like normal? And yeah, some businesses, this is what happens. No big deal. We'll work on the next one.
It was totally normal. And oftentimes it was a side business. So they were able to, be pretty stable, but then start these side things. So I definitely, that influenced me as I started contract work on the side when I was 19, and I've always done it. I grew up with it. So it's just, for me, it's just normal to be, hey, have your whatever day job and go try to do something else, go build something else, and also be okay with it failing.
Yeah. So pretty much always having a side hustle, huh?
Oh, always.
What a great mindset. I love it. Yeah. Do you have any brothers or sisters? Did they grow up like this as well? Very entrepreneurial?
I am the only one to do businesses. I think my siblings, they all decided to be more stable. They didn't want to dive into the frustration of building and crashing and doing it over and over.
Sure.
I did. My brother and I, we started a greeting card company when I was 12, 13. He's a few years younger than me. So we did that. We got one of those spinny racks, got a store to have it was a little mom and pop store to have us display in it. And we took orders. We made the cards, inventory. So it was fun. Wow. I loved it.
At 12 years old. Incredible.
Yeah.
What kind of cards were they? Like greeting cards, birthday cards,
just some
that sort
greeting
of thing?
cards. They were blank, so we didn't write in them, but we did embossing and debossing. So we did that, and then coloring. And then we had an inventory catalog. So we had this little book with everything was numbered. We would take it to the store owner, be like, which ones do you want? Which ones are selling? We had to figure out which ones are selling. And she'd be like, oh yeah, these sold, these didn't. And, we cycled through like, oh, this one's not selling, so we're going to make some of these, try different ones. And, it was fun.
What a great experience for young kids, 12 years old and younger, your brother. What was that experience like when you first approached one of these store owners and said, hey, we want to put our product in your store. Will you sell it? Was that easy for you, or did you have like a lot of preparation or anxiety or anything?
We knew them a little bit. So it wasn't a true cold walk-in, which definitely helped.
Got it. That helps. Yeah,
also,
for sure.
Being a 12-year-old trying to run a business definitely helped. I feel like
there's the cute factor, right? Oh, these kids. They're so cute.
Works really well when you're that young. People are like, of course we'll support you a lot more easily than if you're like 40 years old trying to sell greeting cards.
Yeah,
I don't think it would have worked as
it's just
well.
Creepy.
So definitely took advantage of that. And then it was a little bit of a negotiation because they're like, well, you have to show us, like you have to go. So we had to go make our entire catalog and then come back and be like, okay, which ones do you like? And so there was definitely some of that. Got to put in some effort, show quality, right? They wanted to know the quality. They wanted to know all these things. And then they were the ones that said, oh, you have to go get a rack. Like we don't have any open racks. Our shelves are full. So how do you want us to sell it? And then my parents helped a little bit and like, hey, well, they sell these racks. We can take you and go look and see how much those are. And it was a process, but it was, I don't remember it being super hard, but it's been a long time. So I might have some of those.
Oh, that's wonderful. What a terrific experience to have growing up. All right. Well, many years later, you started a design firm with a few partners, and eventually the partners kind of went in different directions, which is when you then founded the Peterman Design Firm. What did you hope to achieve with the Peterman Design Firm that didn't exist in the previous company?
Well, my main focus was to really do more products. So the original design firm, we did pretty much everything. One of the guys was sales, one was packaging, branding, one was kind of marketing, and then I did a lot of product. And so we did this kind of across the board. We ended up with lots of website clients, and it was a really great learning experience. And those I've ended up incorporating almost all of those things into my current firm, but it was kind of a scattered approach because each one of us had our own contacts and our own specialty. And so what I really wanted to pull together with the Peterman firm is have this product focus. And then obviously we can help you with other things, but really focus on product companies. And originally, the first one, we did stuff like spas and some medical, services, things that are just, there's no products in it. And so there's that. And then the other thing that was big is we had offices for the first one. And there's a certain level of like, oh, we're cool. We have an office. Come visit us. But there's also a whole bunch of extra money. A lot of work went into getting it even set up, negotiating the deal to be able to have the office. And so I went with no offices. I went complete opposite. Never had an office. PO box this whole time. And it turned out it was a really good decision for COVID. We were already there. Everything was set up. But it really didn't, and we had so many clients across the US. So having an office wasn't a huge plus when we were talking to people in Florida. I worked with people in Canada, Europe a couple times, Australia. They don't really care whether I have an office or not. So it really wasn't, the value wasn't there that I saw.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. In the beginning, Pipeline did not have offices either. We were just virtual. Everyone worked from home. We worked from home before working from home was cool. And it was actually right after COVID started that we moved into our first office. And then we've opened a couple others since then. And I agree with you. It is an incredible amount of work to open up an office. And I didn't even do a lot of it, but yeah, it's such a huge, huge headache to do all that stuff, right? The facilities and the agreements and talking with the landlord. Yeah. My goodness. Oh, this is today's only Monday. This is not boding well for me this week. Anyway, you developed a process for product development that you call the Peterman method. Can you walk us through that process and help listeners understand how to use it and how to be more effective at developing new products with it?
So the Peterman method is our take on it. And it's when you look at it, it's a pretty standard process. There's design, there's engineering, marketing, obviously profit has to be there as a step. But where we went through and really added to it is in the beginning. So something that a lot of brands don't look at is legacy, that long term. What is the impact of the business that I'm building with this product, this brand? And I mean, more and more people are thinking about that, but it's something that when people talk about a product development process, they don't really talk about that. They're really focused on, well, I designed it, I engineered it, I prototyped it, and now I'm done. Like it's in manufacturing. And that it kind of just encapsulates that piece. And I really believe in having cross-discipline communication and having people involved in more parts of that process. Because at isolation, as you mentioned, I worked at HP, very siloed. I worked in test engineering for commercial printers only. So we didn't do any new initial design. It was designed, built to completely functional. Then they went through some destruction tests to make sure that it would survive, which was cool. We would roll those things, giant printers down, these bumpy things, just like when you do see those like suspension tests for pickup trucks where they're like driving.
Yeah.
That to printers.
I'm picturing like an Office Space scene where you have baseball bats and you're like crushing things.
Well, it was in a lab, so there was some glass wall around it. Then you did that.
Okay. No baseball bats then. Check. Got it. Right.
But then all my team did was take the broken pieces, disassemble it, lay it out on tables, and figure out which pieces broke, where, and how do we reinforce it. And that was it. Once we did it, went on to the next team. We were done.
That's kind of cool, actually. I think that would be kind of fun.
Super, super cool, but there's no context as to the grader. We didn't know the end use case very well. We just knew it was going into offices, but our directive was just, if breaks, fix. That's it. that was really it. And working in that kind of siloed piece, and then I also worked with a company called Barefoot Sound, where I did everything. I was the only designer that they had. I did all of the design, all of the engineering, all the supply chain, everything, and it made way more sense. And I feel like that's an opportunity most people don't have unless you work at a really small company. And so that really just opened. I need to be aware of so much more than just this little piece, because I would be able to say, oh, well, this design change is going to impact all of these other things down the road. And this conversation now with my boss is going to determine all of these other design changes. And so that really, for me, it clicked of, okay, this isn't designing in a silo doesn't really work very well. You end up missing things and wasting time. And so that was kind of the idea behind the Peterman method, was to go, hey, let's think about these things before we go down diving just this engineering path.
Yeah, I noticed on your website you talk about the what is it called? The legacy branding. Is that what you call it?
Yep.
Yeah, that was a term I wasn't familiar with. Can you talk a little bit more legacy branding? I mean, you talked a little bit about what's the impact that it's going to have, but what's your definition of legacy branding?
Yeah, so for me, legacy branding is, it's something that some people do, but nobody's really given a name to it. And it's looking at your brand really long term, and really just determining actually what the end goal is, right? Do you want this brand to be one where it's like Macy's, these other 100+ year brands? Is that the goal? Is it something that's going to fit that? Or is it something more short term where it really doesn't have a 100-year lifespan? It has a 10-year or 5-year, but it's actually asking those questions before you build the brand. And I feel like a lot of brands, they go out, well, here's our goal. We're going to do X and blah, blah, blah. We're going to just keep going. But nobody really thinks about the end, or if they want there to be an end. And when you don't, then you have to rebrand, and you don't have as much guidance. And a lot of design is guided by how you set up your brand. Like you can't pull them apart. So if you don't put the thought process into what's the legacy of your brand, like what are you going to leave behind? What is the brand going to build? It becomes harder to design, or you'll have designers go in directions that don't align with the actual goal because nobody sat down and said, here's the goal. This is what we want people to remember the brand for. It's going to exist for 10 years. And then whatever, we know this technology is going to be replaced and we're just going to do a new thing or whatever it is. So that's the idea behind legacy branding.
Okay, so it's another layer of intentionality about your product line, your business. Got it. Great. Well, I'm going to take a very short break here and share with the listeners that teampipeline.us is where you can learn more about how we help medical device and other product engineering or manufacturing teams develop turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines to characterize, inspect, assemble, manufacture, and perform verification testing on your devices. And today we are speaking with Ian Peterman. So Ian, in your LinkedIn bio, you wrote, I design, develop, and launch products and brands who at their core want to improve the environment, society, or both. I'm constantly looking for new materials, processes, and products that can improve the world. I'm interested particularly in some of the materials that you have found and have worked with. I think most engineers are pretty familiar with the common ones, right? Aluminum, stainless steel, Delrin, nylon, that sort of thing. What are some maybe less known materials that you have used?
Well, I've used a lot of in packaging world using paper fiber, basically molded together, paper fiber molded pieces. There's been some interesting biodegradable options that have come out in the last few years that are, they're initially okay, and now they're getting better. They're getting more more usable for companies. There's materials I haven't used but really want to. There's things like cactus leather that's coming out where they're using, and there's other plants that they're using as well of building leather-like materials, doing blends between organic and plastics to create more biodegradable options. There's some really interesting stuff in mushrooms. So using mycelium to grow packaging. I haven't gotten anybody to use it yet, but I've done a lot.
Tell me more about that. I can't even contextualize that, to grow packaging.
So your mycelium is right, this network of roots, and it grows very tightly under the right conditions. And so you can, same as you can grow a watermelon into a square. So that's something that I believe it's Japan does. They grow their watermelons into a square so you can stack it and package it.
No way. That's real? That's a thing today?
It's a real thing.
Square watermelons.
So they build these boxes. As soon as it starts to grow, they then put a box around it. And so when it grows, it fills the box, and then they harvest. So
brilliant. So they can stack it. Oh, that's brilliant.
Exactly. So the same thing with mycelium is they can make these molds, and then you let the mycelium grow, and as it grows, it fills that mold. And once it's done, you cut off the tops and you clean it up, but now you have this plant material that has grown into the shape that you want it to be. And so you're able
Fascinating.
I haven't got anybody to do it yet, so maybe somebody will listen to this and say they want to do it. I really want to use this on a product. But
can that be cost effective? How long? It has to take at least days, if not weeks or months.
It can take a few weeks to grow it. I mean, it really depends on how big your packaging is, right? If you're trying to package some giant thing, it's going to take a little bit longer. But you can also do lots of them at the same time. There's I think some ways to accelerate growth as well that they're looked at. So it's you're probably not going to mass produce. You're not going to make a million of these a day, but there could be some really cool applications for more custom things or more one of a kind pieces. Those kinds of things where you can have, or even just luxury level of. Just this is super cool. Like this is getting a product that has this. It's a marketing value in it.
Some kind of bougie couture product I could see.
Yeah, maybe there's some really expensive alcohol that comes in one of those crazy bottles that they only sell 10 of a year. Perfect. Yeah, do that.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Let's see. You talk about your expertise within the product development space as being focused on what you call conscious design. Can you explain a little bit about what conscious design is and how it has impacted your work?
Yeah. So conscious design is this idea, basically blending together a lot of other really great ideas around sustainability, human-centered design. And there's companies that do most or all of those, but no one has really put down and said, okay, well, here's all the really great ideas we've come up with so far. Here's ergonomics and how that works. Here's diversity inclusion. Here's how we incorporate sustainability. And how do we do that on the design side, but also how do we do the business side of it as well? Because as I said earlier, I'm a huge proponent for integration, and I think business and design need to be far more integrated than they are. And I actually consider people like business development, marketing, they're all designers, because they all end up, senior management is designers, because they, at the end of the day, say and approve which designs go out. They set the KPIs and the requirements of what are we going to go design. So, however they want to title it, they are still impacting design very heavily. And so the idea with conscious design is to really take a step back and look at the overarching complete path that, let's say, a product goes from raw material all the way through the design process, how that interacts with the employees, the people actually designing it, how does it react with the consumer, and then the life cycle at the end, which most people ignore, but how does it get recycled? What's its end of life? And really looking at all of that in one piece so that you can make really smart decisions on the business side, because it needs to be profitable, but it can't be terrible for people and it can't be terrible for the planet. So how do you balance all of those and look at this larger picture of design, but not just when you think of, an engineer is going to go do a CAD drawing and we'll go get it made, but how do you design the entire lifespan of that product? And how do you think about everybody who interacts with it along its path? Because it's, a lot of people don't think about how many people it really takes to make a product. And even just on the supply chain side, I talk to people about the one I love is the number 2 pencil, the yellow pencil we all have in school. It comes from like 3 or 4 countries, gets assembled in another one, and then gets shipped. So you're talking about, this is a global product. It is one of the most simple, benign. We never think about it as a complicated thing, but this is a multi-country, international experience to be able to make a pencil. And most people are not thinking about the entire pathway that their raw material to finished product to end of life really incorporates, and how does it impact all the people involved. And so that's the idea behind conscious design, is being more conscious, being more aware of what all that is, and choosing to be conscious instead of just going, I need this material. Okay, cool. Well, how do you get the material? Is that the smartest one? Can we source it from a different location that makes more sense for what we're doing? And really just pulling in more data and thinking more completely through that development process and what it means down the road as well.
Is there a project you've worked on that is a really good example of conscious design, where you can share some specific examples of how this concept was applied practically?
I'm thinking about which ones I can share. One was I worked with this company doing traps. They're for crawfish traps, which pretty easy. Like, they were just making it at home, building it, but they wanted to expand. And so one of the things that we looked at is like, well, how do you produce it as sustainably, as easily as possible, least amount of effort, better material, like what's the most recyclable materials? How do we make that? We also looked at, well, there are so many places we could get this produced. We could get it made overseas. We could get it made in the US. Kind of what are all those options, and how does that fit into the overall story of their brand? Because it all ties together. We're a family-oriented, sustainable, right? You're checking off those boxes. Then shipping giant crates from China may not be the actual best option, right? It may not
right.
fit.
Okay. I see it. Yeah.
And so we actually ended up being able to find a manufacturer that was 3 hours away from where they were. And so we built, based on their story and what they were wanting to do, that was a perfect thing for them. And so now they're having produced this local, they're able to keep that same, and I believe it was a family-owned business. So it's just family-owned using a family-owned going together. But if they hadn't had all these things up front of, this is who we are and what we want, we would have just gone straight to China, and that would have been it. And they wouldn't have fit in as well with who they are and what they were telling people they were about. So making sure that alignment is there.
This is how the brand legacy focus on in the beginning plays out towards the rest of the project. I see.
Exactly.
Okay, very cool. You've actually written a book called Conscious Design. You've talked about, the concept already, but what are folks going to read, or what are folks going to learn when they read your book?
Yeah, so the book goes over conscious design and how you can use it, different areas that you can look at for it. And I break down, there's just kind of few parts to it. One, I go through the entire product development process in this very high level, but I go through the Peterman method approach of how do you break down, and I give just ideas of, okay, well, on this step, here's some questions to ask in order to have a more conscious design approach. What do you ask? What are things to think about? So I think it's three questions for each little area that you can ask and be thinking about. So the goal is, if you're a product developer, a designer, an engineer, even on the business side, I encourage business people to read it too, is to go through and is to start those conversations and start thinking about, okay, well, if we ask this question, how does that inform our design? And then we also, throughout the book, I was very intent on wanting it to be kind of a research driven. So there is footnotes through the whole thing. I reference so many different companies that are, not necessarily doing everything, right? But if they're doing something really great, if they're doing sustainable materials, if they're having diversity and inclusion, if they're really focused on the customer experience, things like that, so that there's real world experiences where somebody can, look at the company, read up on their stories, see what they're up to, and have a real world version that they can look at and go, I like that. I can copy that. How do I pull in that? So the goal is to guide you through how, kind of some ideas on how to do it, and then show you, hey, these are some great companies. This is what they're doing. Take a look at what they've accomplished, and kind of my notes on this is why, like, they're doing this really, really well. Look at this part of their business.
Very cool. Well, we will for sure include a link to the book in the show notes, so users can check it out for themselves. As I was researching for this interview, a word that came to mind that seems to describe you well is prolific. I mean, you've got a podcast of your own. You've started multiple companies. You're an author. You do interviews and speaking. What are some strategies that you use to manage your time effectively that allow you to do all of these things?
Delegation. That is the key to success. I am not one of those people that believes I have to do everything to the minute detail all on my own. I'm a big proponent of teams, collaboration, and pulling in resources to make something happen. So I've had a virtual assistant for four years, and that team has expanded. I have a couple of different ones depending on what I need done. And that's allowed me to multiply my time. And with the design firm, I actually just beginning of 2023 stepped out of doing day to day. I don't do so much design anymore. I do more of this kind of thing, having conversations, talking to people. I talk to clients, customers, but really also recognizing where I'm not an expert. Like that's the other thing. And I think that pairs with delegation is it's impossible to be an expert at everything. So there's the things that I know I'm really good at, which are usually things like finding people, building a team, identifying, what our goals are, and not all, I can't execute everything. It's not possible to do that. And so that's really, I'm able to do all this because I have a good team and support that I've built around me to be able to let me go do fun things like be on a podcast instead of being on a CAD machine.
I'm thinking about folks who work at a big company somewhere. They're maybe individual contributors, and they've maybe never even entertained the thought that they could have a virtual assistant. And maybe you can shed some light on this. I don't know where your virtual assistant or assistants are, but I know that there are some overseas solutions. For example, the Philippines is a popular place to go, and they're very affordable. But what are some of the things that you have your virtual assistants do so that you don't have to spend your time in those ostensibly, kind of trivial is maybe too strong of a word, but they're not areas that you should be spending time so that you can spend time on the things you do the best, where you add the most value?
Yeah. So things that like I don't do any for the podcast, for example. I don't do any of the editing. I don't do any of the social posting. I just record. I click record. I sit and I talk, and I put my notes together, and then I have my team edit, post, share, create little clips, things like that. So my assistant helps me with my calendar. So she sends me every morning. She sends me my to-do list, make sure I have it all in one place. Anything that popped up overnight is there. If I have data entry things where it's just, I went to a networking event a couple of weeks ago, and I have a stack of business cards. And so I'll just snap a bunch of photos, send it to her, and be like, hey, put this in. Can you put this in our CRM? Have this saved up, make any special notes that I need, and then that's taken care of. And I can search it all up later. I can find all the info, but things like that are, they're really important. I need all that info. I need the podcast to be edited and put together, but that's not my core skill. And so that's anything that isn't my core skill. I try to have somebody I can give it to that can, they can do it faster. They can do it easier. They can make it look better. There's no reason. I don't have a burning need to do it all myself. I don't want to master every skill. It's not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, that's a good answer. Delegation. I like that. Let's see. Let's just do one more question, and then we'll wrap things up here. Specifically with the context of your role as a designer, what is one thing that frustrates you and one thing that brings you joy?
I mean, I'm always excited when I get to design something and then hold it. That was probably one of my favorite parts, is always being able to get even if it's just the first rough prototype, being able to have it go from this conversation. We did some CAD or some sketches, and now we're holding it. Now we have something. It's become real, really real for everyone. You can show other people and see it. That's always been huge. I love that. That's exciting for me. Frustration is, there's quite a few that I could list. But I think for me, it's dealing with all of the inputs that sometimes come in. There can be a lot of input. There can be a lot of, especially in the corporate world, input from people who don't know what's going on, but they have power over what you get to do, and trying to navigate kind of the two-level bureaucracy that happens when you're trying to get something together. And so I shy away from that as much as I can. I like to running my firm. I do a one contact rule. You can have one person from your company talk to me. If you have 10 in the room, I won't do it, because
that's fascinating.
It causes too much trouble, because if you have 10 people who haven't talked before, and this is the first meeting, I basically turn into a mediator. And that's not what I want to be. That's not what I went to college or built my career around. So that's, I would say, is my biggest frustration, is that too many voices who haven't figured it out yet, all trying to decide right now suddenly. And if you're the designer in the middle, you're just like, well, now what do I do with all this? Because these are conflicting. I can't make it small and big. Like, where do you want me to be?
That is super interesting. A one contact rule. How does that go over with most companies? Are they fine with it, or do you ever get pushback?
I've gotten some pushback. And sometimes I'll have two if it's completely separate departments. So they want marketing and they want engineering. That obviously can't be one person. But for the most part, people understand. And the way I present it is, well, how will you not waste my time and yours figuring out what you want? Figure out what you want. Come to me, and then we can act. Then I can work with something. Then I can have this singular goal of this is what we want. This is what we want to have happen.
Yeah.
And we move forward. And it's still, it still takes time to go back and forth of, well, you want this, but you also want it cheap. We still got to do something around this. But it allows that to flow a lot easier. And so my pitch is basically, we'll save time. You won't have to pay me my consulting rate for all of those hours, and we'll be able to do this quicker.
Great. Very cool idea. All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining me today. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can find me pretty easily on almost any social media, just Ian Peterman. You can find me on LinkedIn, also at Peterman Firm on all, I think we're on everything at this point. So look for, you can find us. And then our website, petermanfirm.com. And you can also, it's consciousdesignbook.com as well. If you want to look at just the book, which also is on Amazon, you can find me there.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show. What a pleasure it's been to talk with you and learn a little bit about your background and experience. So thank you for sharing all that with the listeners.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm Aaron Monker, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines, and with product design, visit us at teampipeline.us. Thanks for listening.